of chicken shit move that he did there at the end.
A couple of mad drivers right there as well.
Ben Fender's hurt feelings. I love it. Dumb driving there at the end. So you got to be aggressive, but you still got to use your head. You can't just detach it and lay it on the floorboard.
Harvick apparently parked his car in Hamlin's pit stall. Oh. Contact for the lead.
Damn, I'm ready to rip somebody's freaking head off. He can take that and show it where the sun don't shine, baby. Take a cheap shot, he's going to get one back, I promise you that.
Well, I think it actually was for polar opposite reasons. I think, he had some scuffles with guys, and, I think that's where the happy part came from, was everybody was kind of making fun of the fact that he kind of was like me at the time. Like, we'd get mad at guys a lot because of the etiquette side of it, and so I think he just got that nickname from not being so happy, but being the other way, and but he embraced it and ran with it.
He got the nickname Happy when he wasn't so happy all the time. I see where the Happy Harvick thing started, because he was always pissed off.
Kevin always raced with an edge at every level that he's been at, and in the Cup Series, when he was first getting started, he definitely pushed on that edge quite a bit and had no problem showing his true emotions on the track. And I think Happy was a persona that was meant a couple different things out there on the racetrack, but he always wore his emotions on the sleeve and gave everything he had.
Yeah, on track, Kevin is as fierce as they come. Kevin has always had a great ability that when all that's maxed out and you can be as frustrated as possible in the car, he still has a way to use that to his advantage, and I've always respected that.
It's just a switch. He can turn it off and turn it on, and when you see him, he's sitting there and he's smiling at you, and then all of a sudden he'll jack you up.
People say that he's not as much, not as feisty as he was back in the day, but he still is. I mean, he's still as fiery of a competitor as he used to be. He might not show it as much outside the car in some occasions that I remember him doing early in his career, but he still is that way, I think, in a good way.
He's a guy that is typically going to give you what he gets in return, and on most days that's fair. As a race car driver, you're always wanting to push it and find that next little bit, but I would say something along those lines.
I think emotions when it comes to drivers and how it affects them is different for everybody. Some drivers feed off of emotion and feed off of drama. Some of them feed off of anger if they get roughed up a little bit. You try to harness those emotions. It's not always the easiest thing to do, and it's hard to get in that perfect spot. If you asked my bus driver, and probably Kevin's too, I mean, there's something that when we were a little bit on edge, it seemed to bring out the best in us when we were on the racetrack. It's like it kind of puts you in a take no prisoners attitude where, you still were going to drive with etiquette and respect, but you were going to get everything you could get that day, and that's what you always try to do, but it just seemed like you were able to dig a little bit deeper when you were a little bit on edge.
Probably the most intense one for me was Darlington with Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch. Probably the most mad I've ever seen Kevin in my entire career. They got into each other on the track. They came down pit road. Kevin basically stopped on pit road and Kyle had to brake check because they were coming down pit road. Kevin got out of his car, walked down to Kyle's car to confront him, and Kyle decided to gas it and push Kevin's car out of the way with Kevin not in it, and Kevin kind of punched him. Kyle still had his helmet on. The car came over. Luckily, it didn't hit anybody, any of the crew guys. It hit the wall, and then they had to go to the NASCAR trailer. When you're in the NASCAR trailer, we can't go in there. We can sit outside the door, and you could hear the talking inside the trailer, and I was like, ooh, this is pretty bad. And Kevin walked out, said his piece, walked out, and I said, all good. He said, all good, and we left.
Whoa! They stay tight up the racetrack.
Contact!
The 4 of Harvick got into the side of the 9.
Kind of a chicken shit move that he did there at the end.
Yeah, we had a disagreement. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, he's a guy that I think even he would tell you is a pretty calculated individual, and I just thought that there were some decisions made that were not respectful to me, and at some point in time that kind of pushed me over the edge. So we were both willing to go and discuss it, and I thought for that, I had enough respect for Kevin that I was willing to go talk about it, and he was too. And we weren't in there pushing and shoving. We were just talking about our opinions and why things had gotten to where they did, why I took the stance I took, and why he took the stance he took. And I think in that moment we kind of agreed to disagree. But to be honest, I think that's a pretty admirable thing to do in a high pressure moment like that with a lot of eyes, to step away and to be able to go have a conversation about the incident and at least voice our opinions with no one around. I can respect that. I was good with that. It had been a lingering issue. It wasn't just Bristol. There had just been some minor run-ins over the prior probably 3 or 4 months that I didn't like. He didn't like a piece of it, and I didn't like a piece of it. And I think the biggest mistake was we never talked about it. Those frustrations boiled over at the wrong time for both of us, and that kind of led to Bristol and the the aftermath of those next couple weeks.
Sometimes real life teaches you good lessons. Are you guys even?
I can name plenty of times where me and Kevin have gotten into it on the racetrack. The practice scuffle at Dover really came from, there was talk in the garage that RCR had gotten a few things through inspection that weren't necessarily right, and I called it out in the media, and Kevin took issue with it, and as he should, and he stuck up for Richard Childress, and they weren't going to take any shit talking from anybody else, and so we pull out on pit lane, and I remember we stopped at the end of pit lane, and he bumped me right off the bat, and I'm like, okay. I saw it, and then I pull out on pit lane, and he just keeps running in the back of me, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm not gonna go. Then he pulls up beside me and sideswipes me. We just make a bunch of damage to our cars that our team's got to fix, and then, of course, we get out. We're parked right next to each other in the garage area. I think it was just their way of saying that, shut the up and, let's go race.
Oh, contact for the lead. Hamlin into the wall.
Bristol was one that certainly caught me off guard, and it was very uncharacteristic of Kevin. He really just kind of misjudged where he was, and Kevin was running the low line, I was running up high, and he was trying to get behind me and run down the straightaway behind me, and just clipped my left rear enough that it turned me into the inside wall, and all I could find was my Hans device at the time, and I didn't want to chuck my helmet. That costs too much money, so I grabbed my Hans and gave it a twirl towards his door. Needless to say, it didn't do much damage to the four-car. He kept going and proceeded about his day, but yeah, it was. We had other incidences. I can remember there's another one where we got together. I may have caused a wreck. Kevin was in it. I think he parked in my pit stall. I remember he parked, and then my team was trying to push his car out of my stall, and I don't think he does that anymore.
No, there's definitely been moments. We had a few dust-ups. There are many moments along the way, and unless you were really ingrained in the sport, you probably couldn't see whatever tension, competitive tension that was there between Kevin and myself over the years. Kevin and I were racing for the lead on a restart. I was trying to merge back up onto the track, and as we did so, we made contact, and it ended up cutting his tire down and crashed. And I genuinely felt bad, and that's why after the race was over, I went to go see him at his bus.
And I sat there with Jimmie for a minute outside the bus, and I was like, I don't think this is the time we need to apologize. Maybe you should just call him. So I went in the bus and told Kevin that Jimmie was here, and I just said, hey, Jimmie's here, he wants to talk to you, and Kevin did a beeline from the back of the bus to the front of the bus, and that's when I said, calm down, keep your cool, come out and talk to him when you're ready. And then Kevin came out, and I was just sitting there making sure everything was fine, thinking it was fine, and then I saw Kevin say something to Jimmie, and then Jimmie say something back, and then Kevin just popped him in the chest.
And he wasn't ready to talk yet. So I think I was just on the early side, and with everything that was on the line, he came out of his motorhome, and I was ready to talk. I don't think he wanted to talk, and I just needed to give him his space. And we caught up later after that, and I kind of worked through that. But that's just racing.
from my perspective at the Bristol race is, you know, it's the bump and run or the nudge. And you know, I bumped him coming off turn 4, just touched him. And obviously his car was super loose. You know, it got away from him quickly. And obviously I felt terrible about that particular moment. And I don't blame him for being, you know, we're like that. When we get taken out of a race, you're gonna be upset. You're gonna be, you know, fired up. And you know, my guys told me he was coming down pit road or running down the wall. And I earlier that year got taken out and went over and unfortunately lost my temper and punched the guy that was in the car a couple times. And I got fined and 100 points taken away. And so I said, I'm absolutely not fighting. I'm not doing anything because I don't want to get in trouble again. And NASCAR had warned me. So when Kevin came running up and jumped over the car, I just left my hands down to my side. And we had some words. I felt like I was faster than him, and you know, tried to move him up out of the way a little bit. And you know, things happened.
Well, it all started at Bristol in a Busch race. He dumped me at the end, and he showed no remorse. He didn't speak to me about it, and it made me even more mad. And then we start racing, you know, in Cup, and then I started poking the bear a little bit more. I never wrecked him, but I always like just ran into him and just was a jerk. And then he finally had enough at Pocono that day, and he lifted into the corner and tagged me in the left rear and sent me for a ride through turn 3 there, which made for a hell of a highlight. And then that's kind of where things didn't go so well for me in my career, because I said things I shouldn't have said.
You know, his wife wears a fire suit and the family tells him what to do. So
I ended up on pit road fighting and arguing, and not really fighting, we never threw punches, but it was an argument and a lot of pushing and shoving, and I didn't handle any of that stuff correctly. He made light of it and had a little bit of fun with it, with the whole she wears the fire suit in the family comment and the t-shirts they made, and since then my wife and I have had a lot of fun with it and joking around with it, and it's what it was. Like, I knew he purposely wrecked me. Like, I was 100% sure, and I still am. He knows what he did, and I know what happened. And so I was just angry because he wrecked me at Bristol, and then I never wrecked him back, but I messed with him, and then he wrecked me again. Looking back at it, I deserved it, but at the moment, I did not know that, and I was really, really mad. And that was, it was a running joke within our race team at the time, and I just said it out loud.
Ben Fender's hurt feelings, I love it.
We had an issue in Martinsville in 2017, racing really hard at Martinsville and dooring each other and moving each other out of the way. And that was a stern talking to after the race by him. I didn't agree with a lot of what he was saying. Personally, he was kind of contradicting himself because he was accusing me of things that he was actively doing to me at the same time. So I didn't have too much of a leg to stand on. You know, I pleaded my case, but you know, the good thing with Kevin, at least with he and I in that instance, we raced at Texas the next weekend and we were joking about everything and we were over it, you know. So you get your frustrations out and then you move on from it, and you know, you're back to normal the next week. So
exactly the reason why I'm leaving RCR, because you got those kids coming up and they got no respect for what they do in this sport, and they've had everything fed to them with a spoon. So shame you got to get taken out by some rich kid like that.
That was such a crazy time, and obviously his career. I think the week prior he had announced that he wasn't coming back to RCR, and there was just kind of a lot of emotions, but it really had nothing to do with why we got into each other on the track. And I think at the time I was just a young driver who had a fast truck and was making my way up through the field, and you know, Kevin Harvick's in front of you and you're going to try to win a race, and I bumped him in the wrong spot a couple times. I think frustrated him, created some calamity out there, and you know, I didn't want to show anybody that I was going to back down, and you know he's Kevin. He has always been the same, and you know, I think it's just immaturity on my side and both sides that led to things that probably shouldn't have happened, but there's a lot of emotions that boiled over and create a lot of chaos and controversy post that crash and getting together. But for me, I was more shock and didn't really know how to react because the hero that I had watched was super frustrated with me. You know, my favorite driver as a child, who I grew up and finally got to race against, was having a chance to compete against, and was actually trying to pass in the race. You know, I had probably pushed around and raced him a way that frustrated him and created a problem, and one of my first real problems in NASCAR as far as controversy. And for me, as a young man at the time, I was in shock, and the moment was everything was kind of happening really fast. But you know, I think over time it all kind of worked out, and Kevin and I's relationship really healed quick after that.
As you mature and as you get more experience, maybe you handle those things a different way. But early on, I mean, I think I did the same thing, and I know Kevin would, want to go down and have a chat with the other guy.
Obviously, that was a big moment in racing for my family and Kevin himself. But after he had moved on to Stewart-Haas, it wasn't too much longer. He came to me. It was actually here in Daytona. We ran into each other, and I apologized. He apologized. We both realized we've grown up from those situations. Things had changed, and that meant a lot to me. The hero that I had looked up to as a young kid, showing me somewhat of remorse and maturity of how he had handled the situation, and I was able to apologize and how I handled the situation, and from that moment on, we've really had a great relationship, a lot of respect back and forth, and he continued to help me with my career from that point on, and which I'm always grateful for.
I think everyone's different. Everyone handles things a lot differently in their own ways. Whether they hold grudges or they, you get it off your chest and you move on from it. You might stick something in the back of your mind for later on down the road, but you don't really dwell on it too much. So I'm that way. Move on from it fairly quickly, and if you think you've been really done wrong, you're gonna keep it in the back of your head and bring it up if you run into that same person down the road. And I feel like Kevin's the same way. I can't really speak for him, but as far as our incident, that was really the end of it. You kind of get your stuff out on the table, and then the next week you're back to normal.
Happy's a different person now, right? Like, Harvick's not the same person he was when I first started this deal 15 years ago and we were butting heads together. Like, he has changed a lot. I've changed a lot too, to where now we get along really well. And now, like, it's still in there. Don't get me wrong. Like, you can still take the guy off, but his perspective, I think, has changed. And probably kids will do that to you, from what I've learned personally. Kids definitely change your perspective, and I think we've joked a lot together over the years on how we want to keep our kids away from YouTube so they don't see our mistakes and the dumb things we did.
I personally think Kevin's mellowed out a bit. I think he still has the fire on the inside. I just think he regulates it different now than what he did back in the day. I think he was just kind of an impulsive person back then and just would react to the situation. I think he's way more calculated now, and that just comes with growing. And I've got to spend more time with Kevin off the racetrack and talk to him about some different things. I've even gone to him when I had conflicts with other drivers, asking what does he think I should do, and he's been a great ear to listen to those situations and give it his advice. So I still lean on Kevin quite a bit for a lot of advice, because I think he's a person that I value his opinion, and I think he handles himself well.
Kevin Harvick, forever happy.
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 They can boo all they want, I don't care.
Kevin Harvick, forever happy.